Welcome to Engineered for Impact, a podcast helping engineers learn and think more about how they can have a positive social impact with their careers. In this episode, we're going to be discussing the value of networking for career change. I'll cover the motivations for networking when planning career change and make the case for why you should, at the very least, be strongly thinking about chatting to a few people when it comes to career change. I'll discuss how networking fits into the broader career change process, how to prepare for networking, and some actionable suggestions for networking and one-to-one meetings to help them go a bit smoother and to ensure that you get the most value out of them as possible. We're also going to put together a bit of a worksheet, and that's going to be in the show notes page. This is a different style of episode, and I'm really keen to hear your feedback on whether you want to hear more or less of this type of episode. So head to the show notes page at engineeredforimpact.show/networking. That's NETWORKING, and leave us some feedback there. If you do find this valuable, be sure to share it with a friend or a colleague. But without further ado, let's get into talking about networking. So the way I'd like to start this is basically by motivating why I think networking has been really valuable for me. It's been a big feature of the work that I've done over the past year with high impact engineers. The nature of the role requires that networking play a key part of the way we operate. We're continuously trying to build out our network of impact-oriented engineers, and we're also trying to find places for those engineers to do impactful work. So this means we're trying to develop a better understanding of the landscape for impact opportunities for engineers, as well as how that's going to change over time. So we need to be talking to experts in different fields, in different cause areas, and we need to be talking to engineers who have made this transition to understand what their problems have been and how we can go about making it easier for other engineers. So networking for us at High Impact Engineers is really about getting information so that we can refine our ideas and develop a better understanding of how engineers can do impactful work. It's also how we learn about opportunities to share with the community. And this is also a super valuable thing. It just increases our surface area for finding these unique impact-oriented opportunities that we can share with the community and help them achieve their impact-focused goals. So that's the context in which I've been networking over the past year. And obviously that has delivered a lot of value for the organization, for high-impact engineers. And so it has some instrumental value in what we're trying to build with high-impact engineers. But personally, I do take some intrinsic value from networking. I'm far from being an extroverted person. If you were to ask my family or my friends, they definitely back me up on this. And networking can just be a tiring thing that requires a certain amount of extroversion. But despite this, I've really found networking to be an intrinsically rewarding experience just from the personal connections that I've been able to make. I've built out this personal and professional network of people who are really interested in having an outsized impact on the world. And they're just really cool people to have to share these connections with. There's these conversations that I've come away from where I've just thought to myself, wow, it's cool that I chatted to that person. I've talked to people who are experts on nuclear security. I've talked to people who are experts in the biosecurity and sort of biological risk space. And there is just some really fascinating people out there who, all the instrumental value aside, through the networking and through trying to help find opportunities and develop a better understanding on how engineers can have impactful work, all that stuff aside, it's just cool to talk to cool people. And so I think that's the real intrinsic value that I've taken away from doing this networking. And that's a reason why I've enjoyed the podcast so much. It's an opportunity for me to sit down and just have a conversation with interesting people who have gone, who have undertaken a fascinating journey to try and increase their impact, and we share similar values. And yeah, it's just cool to be able to connect with those people, because I think it's easy, talking just from my own experience, to sort of feel a bit isolated in this journey towards increasing your own personal impact. And so there are some intrinsic benefits for just building out a community and feeling like you are part of a community and connected to a community of people who are also sharing in those values and trying to achieve a similar thing. So yeah, I'm motivated to make this episode because I think networking can be a really valuable tool for career change, and I think it can just have some intrinsically beneficial uh, side effects for people who are interested in increasing the impact they have through their work. So this is not going to be a definitive guide on networking in any way. It's really just my personal takes on what I've found to be useful frameworks for thinking about networking, some tools and approaches that I've found useful. Right, so that's why I wanted to talk about networking, but let's talk a little bit about why you might want to network. So I think there's 4 things here that I'd like to highlight. First, you might want to network to create opportunities. Secondly, to gain support. Thirdly, to build skills. And fourthly, to gather information. So for opportunities, I mean, everyone's heard of it's not what you know, it's who you know. It's a bit of a trope in the career space and in career progression, but I guess there's at least some truth behind it. I'm definitely not suggesting that networking will get you places that your skills and experiences can't, or if that it's even a thing that is essential to do to achieve your impact oriented career objectives. What I think I'm advocating for is that networking is a valuable tool to have when you're approaching the process of career change. It can help you widen the surface area for ideas and for opportunities when it comes to planning out your career change process and also starting to take action. Once you start building out a bit of a network, then you start having people who might refer you opportunities, or suggest you connect with other people or connect with other people to you, and you just start experiencing this almost exponential effect of starting to have this broader surface on which you can collect opportunities and sort of make the most out of a high quality set of information and opportunities. So this is probably one of the more obvious benefits or objectives to networking, trying to increase the number of opportunities you can be exposed to. Something that I think is maybe a little less obvious, but an equally valid reason why you might want to network is to gain support for your personal career journey and for your career change process. So there are a few desirable side effects here that are worth mentioning. I think networking can increase your confidence in your own abilities just by talking to people who have transitioned to new career paths, to provide examples of people who have successfully undergone this career transition to increase their impact. I think it's easier to see people who are leading or who appear to be doing impactful work and think, oh well, I can't get to that, or it's really hard to get there, or that's not for me. I'm not that type of person. Once you start chatting to some people through networking, there's quite a good chance that you'll start to realize that you are the kind of person who can do this impactful work. I think if I were to rewind maybe 2 years, when I sort of started thinking about this a bit more seriously, I didn't feel like I had a skill set that was super valuable or relevant to the cause areas that I was seeing discussed. But once I started actually networking and engaging with people, I found out that there are ways that I could use that skill set. And I think if it weren't for actually having those discussions, I wouldn't have gained that confidence that I can actually do more impactful work. The second thing here is creating a bit of a support system. So developing a network of like-minded people who you can seek advice from, mentorship, and just support from in the future is also really valuable. As you're going through whatever stage you're at in sort of your journey towards increasing your impact or just your career in general, you're going to reach points where it's valuable just to chat to other people, and having those people, closer at hand because you've already built that relationship, you've already built out that network, is valuable from the perspective of being able to get support. And the third thing here is just referrals. People within your network may recommend you to other people in their network, and once you get going with networking, it kind of has this self-sustaining aspect of it if things work out. And something that might motivate you to network is skill development around communication and networking skills. It's one of those things that you can read a lot about, you can listen to podcasts, whatever, but the best way to get better at networking is to network. It gives you a really good opportunity to refine your communication skills. You can refine your elevator pitch of kind of, learning how to succinctly communicate what you're about, what you're trying to achieve, and sort of what you're trying to seek other people's help on at the moment, and also the value that you can provide back to them. Gives you an opportunity to practice asking good questions that are truth-seeking and that sort of are aligned with your objectives and help you progress towards a broader career goal. And the final thing that networking can really deliver, and I think this is one that's wasn't as obvious to me when I first started, or I hadn't really thought of networking as being such a valuable tool for this, it's gaining information. So I think networking can really help you find out what it's like to actually work in a certain role or in a certain field. It's a really cheap and easy way to sort of start testing your fit for something. Just by chatting with people who are already doing that work, you're going to be able to learn a lot more and gain a lot more information compared to just like reading a bunch of things online, or trying to sort of read through job ads and stuff like that. You can also start collecting information and data on your key uncertainties around different career paths, or the career change process in general. And to me, I think, yeah, this is just one of the more important motivations for networking. And for me, it's really what drives networking. And maybe it's not the most important, but I think it's one of the most undervalued or neglected aspects of networking. Gaining an understanding about the current state of an industry or a cause area or a company or a role, this stuff can really help resolve uncertainties that you have around your career plans. So I think this leads perfectly into discussing where networking actually fits in the broader career change process. So let's take a step back here from networking and talk about where it actually fits in the broader career change process. So I'm using career change process here as kind of like a loose term. It's not like you're wanting to change your job tomorrow, but maybe it's just keeping opportunities open and a progressive thing that you're doing as you're moving through the world, moving through your career. So let's loosely model the career change process as having a series of steps. Firstly, you develop a desire to want to make a change. Secondly, you want to collect some information and develop a set of options around where you can go with your career or what your next career step could be. Thirdly, you want to evaluate those options. Fourthly, pick one or more to pursue or to start taking some action on. And then fifthly, you actually start taking action to pursue these options. So that might be actually going and doing some additional learning, or it might be putting in job applications, or it's obviously a simplistic model of the career change process that's throwing out a bunch of the nuance about it, and it probably misses a bunch of key things. And you and I might do them in very different orders, but let's just kind of take that process of have a desire, collect some information, evaluate the options, and then picking one or more of those options to pursue, and then actually doing it. Let's just take that as the model for illustrative purposes. So networking can be a useful tool for any of these steps, but what I'd really like to focus on is how it can be valuable in the evaluation and taking action to pursue an option steps. And here's why. I think networking is undervalued for its ability to gather information that is otherwise difficult to find. It could take you a few hours to research ideas that somebody else could tell you in a 30-minute meeting. And so And so that's why I think it's such a valuable tool to be employing when you're in these, evaluation and taking action steps of the career change process. When you're at this point of actually starting to test and learn and try to figure out what you want to do, you might have some key uncertainties that you want to address. And to address them, you need to get information, and that's where the networking really, forms one of these tools that you have to collect that data to allow you to make more informed career decisions, and even just resolve uncertainties you have and make the process a bit easier. So I think this ability for networking to give you access to information that's otherwise difficult or time consuming to find is where the value is. So in the broader career change process, networking is like your experimental data collection tool. It's how you actually go out into the world and gain access to data to resolve key uncertainties you have around a career change plan. So if networking is going to be how you go about collecting data to help you make a more informed career decisions, then I think it's worth to touch on how to actually prepare for the networking. So when I was doing my PhD, I went through the process of collecting data and analyzing it to answer a hypothesis. And the terminology that we used for one of these cycles was an experimental campaign. So I like to think of networking like this. Instead of it being a continuous process, I like to think of it as a series of networking campaigns. Each campaign has a clear objective, and it's seeking to address maybe 1 to 3 key uncertainties I have around a topic. A campaign will consist of a series of conversations with a narrower set of individuals to help address those key uncertainties. For example, you might have uncertainties around, what types of skills or experience is essential for the role that you're interested in, or maybe, what's just nice to have. What's the job market like? Who is hiring? What hours are required? How does that, fit into your preferred work-life balance? Is there much room for mentorship in the field? What's the future of the field? Is it growing? Is it shrinking? Or, are things changing? I think it's worth thinking about which of these uncertainties would be most useful to have resolved. You could go so far as to rank the uncertainties that you have, but I think at the very least just spending some time thinking about how much resolving each of those uncertainties would change the actions you plan to take can give you some indication of which uncertainties you should focus on first. As an example, you might be unsure if you have the right qualifications to work in a certain role, and you might also be unsure who is hiring for those roles. If you were to learn that your qualifications aren't sufficient, then your plan might need to change, kind of significantly to include gaining some additional qualifications, going to do some online courses, maybe going and doing, some additional education, or just deciding not to go into that field at all and pursuing something else. Compare this to knowing who is hiring for that role. That's just going to change which companies you're looking at submitting job applications to. So the two things, knowing if your qualifications are sufficient, will change your plans much more dramatically. So it's probably the thing you want to focus on first. You might also have decisions to make that are conditional upon different uncertainties. So it can be useful to set up your networking campaigns to reflect this. So for me, having a clear objective when I'm approaching a networking campaign helps keep me focused on the uncertainties that I'm trying to resolve and get the most out of those networking conversations. So we've discussed why you might want to network and where networking fits in the broader career change process, and how to go about preparing for networking so that you can get the most out of it. But let's talk about some actual actionable tips that I found useful for networking and the actual, process of setting up a meeting, chatting to a person. So firstly, you got to actually find people to talk to. In the beginning, this is difficult, but I think it gets easier once you broaden the network because you can start asking for referrals. So it can be that once you get a couple of meetings going, they kind of, one person refers another, 1 or 2 people, and you kind of get a bit of you get a bit of momentum here. A shameless plug here, high impact engineers can help. We've got a network of engineers and experts across a range of cause areas who we can connect people with. So if there's a specific uncertainty or a specific, cause area that you want to learn more about, um, you know, we at High Impact Engineers, we can help connect you with other engineers and experts who can help you along this process. And then, once you get on a roll, you might find that some introductions lead to others, but getting that first one can be hard. Cold messaging and emailing does work. It can feel a bit intimidating or silly to do sometimes. I know I've definitely found it to be a bit uncomfortable to do because it feels like you're bothering the person. It feels like who am I to be asking for this person's time or asking them to sit down and help me solve my problems or resolve my uncertainties. I think the thing to keep in mind here, though, is there's really high upside and there's almost zero downside to you. At worst, you'll have to sit down and have a conversation with someone, and you don't learn anything. They don't really feel like it's valuable, and you kind of just walk away thinking, that was maybe a waste of half an hour. But that's like about the worst that can happen, unless you're just going in and insulting people, which I obviously wouldn't recommend. So yeah, the downside's very limited, but the upside can be huge. Talking to one person may lead to talking to another person, and they might be the perfect person for you to chat to. So they might be able to give you the information that you need to figure out where you want to go, or they might be able to provide you with a connection, or just a mention of a company name that kind of gives you enough information to start pulling on a thread that leads to something really impactful for you. Looking out for conferences, such as the Effective Altruism Global conferences, and especially the Effective Altruism Global X conferences, which kind of like local community, sort of more geographically isolated community-run conferences, can be a valuable way to find like-minded individuals who have, similar values to you around increasing the impact you want to have with your career. Another way you can go about finding, the first few people to connect with is look for organizations that you're interested in, have a look at their team page, look those people up on LinkedIn, see if you've got mutual connections. It doesn't always work. And sometimes, if you're really trying to push into a different direction, you won't have any mutual connections. But when it does, it can be a good way to get a warm introduction to someone. And even if you don't have those connections, you can always just connect with them, reach out. Again, it's one of those, cold messaging, cold email, and cold reach outs on LinkedIn, huge upside and almost zero downside. So, from an expected value point of view, always seems worth doing to me. Your university might have an alumni network that might be worth tapping into. You can also try locating community builders or people who could be very well connected in the space that you're interested in. So, what we're doing at High Impact Engineers, I would classify as community building. And so for us, our job, the way I view our job as community builders is to actually help people get more connected to the community. So we actively want to be making these connections. So, community building organizations or individuals, they can often be like a central hub who can refer you to a bunch of different people around that community. This is obviously because they're well connected, but they can also make tailored recommendations and help you sort of quickly get towards your objectives instead of kind of stabbing in the dark, reaching out to people who you're not quite sure if they've got the right information or they're the right person to chat to. Community builders might have more insight into what other people in the community can provide you and make those tailored recommendations. So I think there are a bunch of ways you can make those first few connections that, it might just take a bit of time and persistence of cold emailing, cold messaging, going to conferences, tapping into an alumni network, chatting to a community builder and getting them to make referrals or asking for referrals from them. But once you've actually got that introduction made, you've connected with somebody, and you're then looking to set up a time to actually talk online or in person. Most likely it's going to be online. This can sometimes be a bit tricky and awkward. Um, for me, I'm based in Australia, so pretty much if I'm looking to network with almost anybody in any other country than Australia, and even sometimes in Australia, it's non-trivial. And so I think, there's plenty of calendar management, like booking tools that are out there. Things like Calendly or TidyCal, or I think Google's got some sort of booking system, you know, something like that, just to reduce the back and forth and just make it much lower friction to set up a time. It makes it super easy, and it just lowers the barrier for the other person to say yes and to like actually find the time. Um, if you don't have one set up yourself, a lot of people regularly networking and meeting with people or just working asynchronously, a lot of people have these types of tools set up. So just asking them if they've got some sort of calendar booking link that they can share with you to find a time that works best can be an easy way to go about this. So you found somebody, you've set up a time, and you're getting ready to prepare for the meeting. Setting a clear objective can be really helpful. So tying back to preparing for your networking campaign, what are the sort of 2-3 questions or 2-3 uncertainties that you're trying to collect data on from this person? So have a clear objective around what you're trying to achieve from that discussion. Now, one way to help actually operationalize and achieve this objective is to create sort of an elevator pitch for yourself and for what you're trying to achieve with that networking. So, for me, during my PhD, I, obviously met with my advisors regularly. And I found that, I'd be explaining a challenge I was having in the lab or with the research that I was doing and asking for advice, but, they'd maybe be confused about, why I'm doing this, or giving me information that didn't really help or was repeat of previous information they'd already given me. And, realize people are just busy. And even if you've met with someone multiple times before, it's unreasonable to expect them to, recall the full history of your interactions in that present moment to help give you the most valuable information that they can. It's very easy to fall into the trap of, you're spending a lot of time thinking about these things, and you have obviously all the context on what you're trying to achieve, and you need to figure out how to convey that context succinctly, and how much of that context is required for that other person to give you the best advice that they can. The takeaway from this was really for me to go in with the assumption that the person that I'm seeking advice from or seeking input from only has the context that I provide them in that moment, and to not assume that they have any additional context on top of that. So if there's something you think is important for them to know in order to give you good answers or good feedback, then make that clear to them. And I think sort of constructing this elevator pitch of here's my context, here's what my key uncertainties are at the moment, and here's how I think you and your experience or your knowledge or information that you may be able to contribute to helping resolve my uncertainties. And then you can sort of use that to frame the conversation and sort of communicate to them what version of this conversation would be most impactful for you. So, as an example of this, one of my recent networking campaigns has been focused on gaining a better understanding of where engineers could fit into the nuclear risk and nuclear policy or nuclear risk reduction space. And so, the key uncertainties I kind of have around that have been around like, where do people from a technical background fit into policy work? Is there a need for engineers in the nuclear weapons or the nuclear risk reduction space? And the way I've kind of pitched this is, high impact engineers is helping to empower engineers to do more impactful work. And we think nuclear risk reduction is a high impact cause area in which engineers could be doing impactful work. Well, some of the things that I'm interested in is where people from a technical background, such as engineers, fit in policy work, and what the landscape is like for engineers in nuclear risk reduction. And so having some sort of elevator pitch type thing where you can basically explain your context is really useful. But then it's good to follow that up by asking good questions. Don't forget that talking to someone is a unique opportunity to gain insight into their experience. There's a lot of stuff you can go find from just like Googling and looking online. The things that are harder to find is what somebody's experience of a field or of a role or of an area is actually like. So focusing on, what they found useful during their process of getting into a field can help you discover things that you would otherwise not find. Keep notes as best as you can. This is something that a skill that I've had to develop more over the course of the past year or so. With doing more networking. Taking notes are like particularly useful for keeping track of things that you promise or things that the other person promises you. And this is really useful when it comes to following up, which is the final sort of actionable step that I have here is, once you've gone through the process of finding somebody, setting a time, sitting down, having a chat with them, communicating clear objectives, and making some notes of what you promised to do in that meeting and what the other person promised you, like maybe some resources or whatever. The next thing you need to do after you finish the meeting is to follow up. So follow up with those things that you promised. If the person hasn't sent through the stuff that they promised they would, just give them a gentle nudge. So, you don't need to do the follow up, 30 minutes after the meeting. Give it a couple days. And if you haven't heard from them, just touch base and say, hey, I'm just following up about, X, Y, and Z that we discussed during the conversation. You mentioned that you could introduce me to so-and-so, find a suitable length of time. And I typically, make a note to follow up about a week after the conversation as a rule of thumb. People are busy. Sometimes things get lost. Like I am more than happy for people to follow up with me if I've totally forgotten something or if I just haven't gotten around to it yet. I think it's also a good way to make sure that both of you are getting the most out of that conversation because you've already spent that time chatting to each other. Yeah, and the follow-up can kind of help seal the deal on some of the value that you can get out of networking. Down the track, if an introduction that person has made or a resource that they recommended proves to be really helpful, I think it's nice just to send them a quick message and say, hey, that introduction you made to so-and-so was really valuable for me. It's changed the way I thought about X or Y, or, it led to this opportunity or that opportunity or led to another introduction. Or I think just saying that, it's a nice thing to do because, it's nice to receive messages like that. It's nice to know, if you're the person who has referred a connection or referred a resource, it's nice to know that person got some value out of that. But I think it's also really useful for the referrer to know that somebody got value out of something because then they might have the opportunity to refer that again. This can also cut the other way, I guess, with, if you found that they referred something that turned out to not be that useful, you could also let them know because that may also be, quite useful but information for them to have going forward. But certainly if you found something really useful, it's good to tell the person so that they know that is something that they should be referring to people again in the future. And you can also, on the follow-up, you might have some ideas around, how you can return some of the value to them. And you can kind of, offer ways that in the future, you can help them out. All right, so that's a lot of networking talk, but let's sort of bring that together. So when I'm approaching networking, the way I tend to think about it is, what are the key uncertainties that I'm trying to address in a networking campaign? Then based on those uncertainties, who would be good to talk to? How am I going to find those people? Find the people, use a calendar scheduling tool to make it easy for the other person to reduce friction, use an elevator pitch to provide the person with the important and relevant context to what I want to speak to them about. Ask good questions that align with my objectives for that conversation. Keep notes of what was discussed, any resources that I promised, any resources that the other person promised me, and follow up actions for me or the other person, and then follow up in a timely manner. And so that's how I'm thinking about the process inside a networking campaign. And then depending on the uncertainties that I have and sort of how uncertainties are related, I might be looking to connect together a series of networking campaigns, each of which have a certain objective to resolve an uncertainty in the career change process. And so I think breaking these down into campaigns and approaching the campaigns in this way has helped me achieve the benefits of networking more effectively. So it's helped me create additional opportunities, gain support, build skills, and also gather information. So that's kind of how I've been thinking about networking lately. We're also going to put together a bit of a worksheet, and that's going to be in the show notes page for this episode at engineeredforimpact.show/networking. That's NETWORKING. Like I said at the top of the episode, this is a very different style episode to what we typically do. So the most valuable thing you can do if you want to support the show is to head to the show notes page and leave us feedback. Thanks for listening, and happy problem solving.